with some of the items that we have. I know Commerce is running a little long, and we will try and get those members engaged as we have our discussions. But I would like to open our meeting and ask for any bill introductions. Representative Hoy. Yes, any bill requests for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Joella Hoy, in K-12 Education Budget Committee, we heard testimony about the substitute teacher shortage. So I would ask you all to take a look at 22 RS 2825 relating to KPERS employment after retirement, decreasing the required waiting period to 30 days for a period ending June 30th, 2023, to see if we could maybe provide some relief for staffing shortages. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions, committee? Seeing none, is there any objection? And without objection, we will request the bill for introduction. So, further introductions? Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sean Miller. I'm here today on behalf of the Motor Vehicle Protection Products Association. I'd like to request introduction of 22 RS 3039. It's an act concerning service contracts. A few years back, we enacted a service contract law to cover sort of road dings, tire blowouts, things like that. And we'd like to add windshield replacement or repair to that list.
Thank you. Committee questions? Repeat. Which group are you representing with this?
The Motor Vehicle Protection Products Association, MVIPA.
Thank you. Representative Riley.
Just a quick question. Is that any conflict with the windshield replacement collision policies that's written by automotive policies?
The service contracts are not an insurance product. They're a product that you can buy from your motor vehicle dealer, manufacturer. So there's some overlap there. I think I would maybe leave it up to the companies to determine whether it's a conflict or not a conflict.
Other questions, committee? Seeing none, is there an objection? Without objection, we will request the bill for introduction. Further bill requests. Mr. Modisett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee Modisett, Kansas Insurance Department, would request the committee introduce RS 2947. No. That's the one I have. I'm sorry. 3023. I have bad notes. Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. It deals with updating rebating statutes.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, is there an objection? And without objection, we will request the bill for introduction.
Thank you.
Further introductions? Seeing none, we are winding down on the days for bill introductions. And we have a few things to cover. Today, we will be getting an update on 2110, followed by the hearing on Senate Bill 199. And if we are able to move efficiently, we will continue with our hearing on House Bill 2586. The conferees have been warned if we're running late, we might have to slide that one, but it looks like we may be able to stay on time. We'll see how that all works. One other detail, committee, I would bring to your attention, minutes have been distributed. If you would look at those minutes, we would take action on those on Wednesday. So if you have any updates or corrections, be ready with those on Wednesday. And we would also look to work some of our bills at that time. In our first order, I think I may take just a moment for us to stand at ease for a moment, make sure that Representative Epley is heading here, and then jump back into what we need. Oh, he's right there. He's in the front row. Boy, it's hard to see. Thank you for that. So, I will, thank you. So thank you for that. And so that takes care of the details of what we'll try and work through. And we will be trying to schedule as many bills as we can for hearings in light of losing Wednesday, and I appreciate everyone shuffling so that those bills could be heard today. I need to return to the item of bill introductions because I needed to introduce a bill. It is RS 2853, and I know that Representative Donahoe had told me what it dealt with. And thanks to Eileen, I know more. An act concerning exemptions from pre-authorization. So I hope you don't have a lot of questions, but any questions that you have? Is there an objection? And without objection, we will request the bill for introduction. Thank you for the reminder. So, Representative Riley.
Just for reference, are we going to be covering 2210 today?
2110 would be,
2110.
yes, did I say 22?
Well, our full.
Yeah. Oh, I got you. The folder says that. So it is 2110, and hopefully our content is indicative of 2110. And I am remarkably lucky because mine says 2110. So anyway. But thank you for the clarification, and that is where we are. And thanks for everybody scrambling from our other committees to get here. With that, I would see if we could call on our research department to just update us on where we are with 2110.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, you may recall there was a hearing on House Bill 2110 in this committee on February 10th, 2021. This was regarding a requirement for the coverage in the State Employee Health Care Commission plan, so the State Employee Health Plan, for the coverage for the diagnosis and prescribed treatment for pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, or PANS, and pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders that are associated with streptococcal infections, or PANDAS. And this was a matter that had also been studied the prior interim by the House Committee on Health and Human Services. The bill that was before this committee required on or before March 1st, 2023, that the Health Care Commission, which administers our state health care benefits program, submit a report to the legislature regarding the coverage that was specified in the bill. And so there were coverages that were specified for the treatment and diagnosis regarding PANS and PANDAS. Then the bill further provided that after the next legislative session, following the receipt of the report, which would be your 2024 session, the legislature could choose then whether to offer or not require this coverage for PANS and PANDAS in both individual or group health insurance policies that would be issued or delivered for renewal in Kansas on and after July 1st, 2024. The committee held considerable discussion. I provided previously to you the fiscal notes that were assumed for the cost at that time, which were primarily based on a prevalence rate of 1 in 200. Those were numbers that had been prepared by the State Employee Health Plan. And the committee then sent you, via your chairperson, a letter to the director of the State Employee Health Plan to assist in your review of House Bill 2110. That letter was submitted in March of 2021, along with research that was prepared by KLRD as well as the insurance department. And the committee requested that the State Employee Health Plan provide further cost analysis regarding the inclusion of House Bill 2110 in the State Employee Health Plan and assistance in determining the broader social and fiscal impacts of the bill that were not addressed in the fiscal note. As you may recall from our review of health insurance mandates, we reviewed the statutory requirements that are generally followed when an insurance mandate is proposed in a House or Senate committee. And there are two sets of factors that are included in KSA 40-2248 and 49. Those are both social impact factors and financial impact factors. Those are factors that often are not known at the time of the bill hearing, but may be important in your consideration. For example, a couple of the social impact factors would be to the extent that the treatment or service is generally utilized by a significant portion of the population, the extent to which insurance coverage is generally available for this benefit or provider, and if the coverage is not available, the extent to which the lack of coverage results in an unreasonable financial hardship on persons that need treatment. Among the financial impact factors would be the extent of coverage the extent to which insurance coverage of this kind proposed would increase or decrease the cost of that treatment or service, as well as the extent to which a mandated treatment or service might serve as an alternative for more expensive treatment or service, and the impact of this coverage on the total cost of health care. The State Employee Health Plan and the State Employees Health Care Commission received the request. They sought the assistance of Siegel Consulting, which provides consulting services to the State Employee Health Care Commission, and you have received a copy of that report, and a representative of Siegel will be participating virtually today to outline the report and the findings of Siegel that were meant to provide assistance regarding your consideration of House Bill 2110. We will also hear from a couple of other representative conferees to provide an update on the status of House Bill 2110. Mr. Chairman, that's a review of the committee's request for consideration. I would note it's very similar to one this committee submitted a few years ago for elemental foods when there was a similar mandated treatment and sought additional information regarding the prevalence and the usage and utilization.
So thank you. Any questions anyone have for research? Representative Berquist.
Yes, thank you. Please remind me, you mentioned prevalence and you mentioned 1 in 200. Was that 1 in 200 by general population?
This would be children that would generally be subject to the bill. I believe the general age range contemplated is 3 to 14. There is comment in the Siegel report that would increase that age to age 17 and speak then to any prevalence that might be noted.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is probably just a research question, but there's this one form here that doesn't have a letterhead or anything from Shannon White. What organization does she represent?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Ms. Wright was one of the proponents, and so selected to hear from today would include Representative Epley and Ms. Wright, who both appeared as conferees that were proponents to advancing House Bill 2110, as well as a representative of an insurance company that was neutral. And Larry Ann Brown will appear on behalf of Cigna.
So someone that, not a legislative person, someone that...
She is a parent and social worker, so she spoke to both experiences.
I just didn't get that from the reading here, so thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? And if not, thank you for providing us where we are in the process. And with that, I would welcome Dr. Epley, Dr. Representative Epley, to the committee. Thank you for being here, and sorry to be a little slow in getting you up here.
That's fine, Chairman Johnson. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and esteemed members of the committee. It's a pleasure to appear before you today on behalf of the long and winding road of House Bill 2110. I guess maybe I am a little bit invisible, but I hope I'm here long enough to at least opine my testimony for your consideration. You do have a copy of it. It's only one page. I'm going to talk really fast so I can get to tax and so you can get on to other affairs. This is really an update on 2110. You heard it last year and we kind of stalled out. We really stalled out because of a cost report. I did get a cost report provided to the committee chair and to the committee, but it was felt to not be adequate and they wanted something more legitimate. And so we worked with the State Employee Health Plan and came up with a Siegel report, which you have a copy in your testimony there. So please look it over and you'll see that it's really I think a lukewarm to favorable report for this based on the experience of 1 in 200. I think that's pretty accurate. She already said the name of it. We could all have you take a trial test and see if you can recite it together all at the same time. It's about 15 syllables. And really, it's not a make-believe diagnosis. When I was in medical school a few years ago, we learned about pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder and or PANDAS, which is post-streptococcal infections. And we were unclear how bona fide that was, but in recent years, in the last 10 years, we've learned it's a very bona fide diagnosis. It's basically an autoimmune disease that occurs after some type of significant infection. Typically, streptococcal infections are the most common one. And you'll see that in my testimony. There are many treatments that have been utilized for PANS and PANDAS over the year, including antibiotic cocktails, steroids, counseling because there is a strong mental health component to it. A lot of these kids really have amazing mental health problems, which is really in a form of encephalitis that's brought on by the infection. I'm happy to answer questions about that if you need help on that. But make no mistake, this is a very real diagnosis, a very real problem in Kansas for Kansas children. And what we're hoping through, and the way this bill is crafted in 2110, if you read it carefully, it's crafted to basically simply utilize the state employees health plan to gain more data, more information, and it's the next step, in my opinion, to see if then at some time, and I may be gone, but maybe it can become a mandate for other health insurance plans or all insurance plans throughout the state. Now, that won't affect all children, but it'll affect those that have private insurance, and I think that would be a huge step in providing treatment. The treatment involved is immune globulin. It's very expensive. It runs in cost anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, sometimes even $6,000 per treatment. You don't generally need more than a treatment or two. Sometimes children do need 3 or 4 treatments, but generally the average is 2 to 3 infusions of IgG, and it has a dramatic effect positively that lasts for many, many years. This seems to be the safety on the gun, if you will, as I said in my testimony, that really stops the process, arrests it, and puts the child or the patient, in this case, back into a stable place mentally. There is an ICD-10 code for it, so if you don't think it's a real thing, it is. It's codable now. People bill for services for this. So I appreciate this opportunity, and when asked, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I can stick around long enough if needed to answer those questions. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Representative, for being here. If you want to just stay for questions, and then if you need to go on, we would understand. Representative Riley?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Apple. So your IV program, is it a pilot program? It stated it was a pilot program. So you're just doing this for a couple years?
Well, so the way this works on the state statutes, which I outlined, and you might help you to understand this, it's a pilot program through the state employees health plan. This treatment has been around for a decade or longer. The infusion of IgG, this isn't something experimental. It's a bona fide treatment. Lots of times these patients, and my other discussant may talk about this, but they typically start out with applications of antibiotic cocktails or steroids, but pretty shortly, oftentimes, physicians that are knowledgeable about this will go ahead and order IgG infusions, which is, it's not experimental, it's not something hocus pocus. I've seen the studies on it, and it is dramatic. It halts the disease process, and it actually puts the child into remission. Sometimes it takes more than one treatment. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3. But we're doing this in a stepwise fashion, Representative, to provide thoughtful, monetary, conservative approach so that we're not trying to roll this out for the whole state of Kansas. Statute does not allow that, as I indicated in my testimony. But if we can implement it through the state employee health plan and get some meaningful data on what the real cost is, I mean, we have projections by the Siegel report, but if we have meaningful data in 2 or 3 years, I think then we could look at a widespread perhaps requirement for other insurances in the state of Kansas. That's the approach that we're trying to take here, Representative.
I think you answered my question. So you just give it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and that is 6 months apart, 1 year apart, and then you know that everything is good and you don't give it to them for the rest of their lives?
Well, so every case is different. You know, medicine is not, it's not one size fits all. There are rare cases where children will get this on an annual basis, an infusion or 2 for 2 or 3 years. There are other cases where they've gotten 1 infusion and they've never had to get another one. So it's quite variable, and it depends on the treating physician. He's the one that gets to make the call on whether you need another infusion or not. Those infusions can be as close as a month apart. They can be as far apart as 2 years apart, depending on the clinical course of the patient. The clinical course is very hard to predict. There are many mental health vestiges of it, and so you have to be really experienced in this disease situation to understand the mental health aspects and pay close attention to it as it progresses.
Okay, thank you very much.
I hope that was helpful.
Representative Berquist.
Thank you, Doctor. The diagnosis of PANS or PANDAS is not a simple diagnosis. Is that correct?
I would say certainly for primary care physicians like myself, it's complex, and I would certainly probably refer to a pediatric neurologist in this case for a firm diagnosis to be sure that what we're dealing with, because there's just a lot of spillover with mental health disorders also.
Right, and just to follow up, then the question is that the intensity of the cost, we're talking about cost and insurance, is you want to make sure that you've diagnosed the correct diagnosis so that you're not treating something with the wrong treatment. I mean, because some of the symptoms are similar to other mental health conditions.
These
right?
children can present with acute delirium where they're completely, they're phobic and they're delirious. And certainly one can think that those are acute mental health disorders. But in this case, it almost always, there's a heralding event of significant infection, typically a streptococcal infection, oftentimes a sore throat that was treated with appropriate antibiotics. But the child recovers from that, but then develops these bizarre behaviors. And some of you were here for testimony, so you may recall, we actually had a video and we had some other things to show you. They have acute phobic reactions to going to school. I mean, not necessarily school attendance, but maybe leaving their room or they'll do certain repetitive behaviors that are quite striking. And it's the thing about it, it is a dramatic change. And the nice young lady that's going to testify after me can probably expand on that a little bit more on how the patients present, because she's dealt with it as a parent. And I've seen it a couple of times in my practice, but they got referred out pretty quickly and got help from specialists at Children's Mercy.
Thank you, sir. And yes, those were dramatic presentations in our previous hearings. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Doctor, what happens if they go untreated? What's the long-term perspective? What do you see happening if they go untreated?
So I'm aware of that, and I've seen those patients that are not treated, and lots of them, some of them never recover. I mean, they end up as part of the mental health patient diagnosis forever, and they never get better, and it's a complete change of course of their life. It's dramatic. They can't finish their education. They can't become a productive member of our society.
So they end up long-term care?
Yes, long-term care. They need caregivers. They can't complete their education. I mean, it can be that severe.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for joining the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we'll hear from Shannon Wright. And Shannon, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of this committee. I appreciate you hearing my testimony today. This has been a decade-long journey for me. My daughter, for over 10 years ago, my daughter suddenly and without any known explanation changed overnight, and that was on September 11th, 2011. That life-changing event was so traumatic for her and our family that it took 9 months of doctor's appointments and research before she was finally able to receive the life-saving treatment of IVIG that brought her back to us. The only thing I can really compare it to that you might kind of understand is, my grandmother had Alzheimer's. And so it was like, the shell of her was the same, but things were completely different. She was not the same person. And so that is what I compare that experience with my daughter to. Like, she was the same little girl on the outside, but everything was different. She was not functioning, and I kind of expounded more on that on the testimony before, and I don't want to go more into that, but I just want you to know that comparison. So after she regained her health, I became aware of a community of parents that had this same medical event with their own children, and actually flew to Atlanta to attend a conference where Dr. Sweeto was speaking, and she was the researcher that discovered it from the National Institute of Mental Health. She discovered it in the 1990s. And so because even though we had gotten this treatment, I wanted to know more about how to help Allison. And so came in contact with parents there and became aware of other parents in Kansas that had the same. So what struck me is sitting down with parents, it's the same story. It's like you're living your life and then one day everything is different. And all of a sudden you are like coping. Sorry, I can't, I gotta cry. I'm crying every time I talk about this. It's traumatic and that's why I cry about it. And I'm so sorry. It's like you having to go in front of people and talk about the worst event of your entire life, like over and over and over again. And so, that's what this experience is kind of like for me. It is not pleasurable for me to relive this. So I hope we can stop having committee meetings and we can just go ahead and make this a pilot program. But so anyway, it put me in contact with all those families, and you're realizing that this was such a bigger issue. And with this group of parents, we started working together to bring awareness to Kansas. So many of these families have testified or submitted a written record that is on record for you all to review. These initially were submitted to the House of Health and Human Services Committee, along with other treating physicians. And so we also appreciate the Governors Collier and Governor Kelly for issuing proclamations each year for awareness days. We are so appreciative of Representative Susie Carlson and Representative Epley for just their help and support through this process. So our group, sorry, I hope that you have time to read that Siegel report. I thought it was pretty well done, actually. It really spoke to the struggles that these children have and that the struggles that their families have. I was so pleased to see that an outside agency could come in and validate everything that we have been coming to these committees and telling you is happening. That was very powerful for me to read and very validating, and I appreciate that because everything we've been telling you has been true. Sorry, I'm just kind of seeing what I want to talk about here. So PANS was first introduced in 2012 by Dr. Sweeto, and why that's important is that's the overall umbrella. So it includes more triggers other than strep. Strep was the first one identified by her in the 1990s. And then that was the one that has the most amount of research on because she said they had to identify one trigger. That's just how research works. Like you've got to identify one infectious trigger and then research like the treatments to see if they work. So she discovered that she discovered the strep trigger while she was conducting research on Sydenham chorea, which is another strep-triggered illness in the 1990s. So I heard you guys asking, and that was such a great question. So why does early and appropriate treatment matter? Because not only does PANS create a severe disruption in the life of a child and a family, but untreated, or if the treatment is inadequate or significantly delayed, it can cause permanent debilitation. And if treated early and in a timely fashion, it can remit entirely. So IVIG is an important tool for physicians to be able to use if needed with their patients. It's not going to be needed with every patient. Oh, hello. How are you? Sorry. I used to babysit his son, so when I was in college. Yeah. So just backstory. Also Doug Mays' children. So if you allow me to take care of like your all children, I hope you believe me here when I talk about the state of Kansas' children, okay? That was a long time ago. A lack of insurance coverage makes IVIG treatment inaccessible to families due to the high out-of-pocket costs. Our family is very fortunate. We were able to access those funds, and it wasn't easy for us, but we made it happen. For some families, that's going to be completely out of their realm. So just using my own child and family as anecdotal evidence, I believe we saved the state of Kansas thousands and thousands of dollars by paying out of pocket for IVIG. When my daughter was very ill, well, she was very, very ill. They just couldn't maintain her at school. And they wanted to put her on homebound services or put her at this very restrictive placement where other very violent children were placed. It was not the appropriate placement for her. So to appease the school, I asked her to be assessed for the severely emotionally disturbed waiver through the community mental health clinic with hopes with providing her more support at school. I knew at the time that we were going to go for IVIG. I didn't know that was going to work at the time. I was just, as a parent, I had found this doctor in Chicago, and he had done research with Dr. Sweeto. And so we drove there to get that treatment. She did qualify for that waiver and was issued a Medicaid card. My daughter received case management, attendant care, and psychiatric services paid for by the state of Kansas. Meanwhile, we pursued that treatment of IVIG. And we pursued IVIG after every other treatment option was exhausted. So this feels like when we got IVIG, it felt like the equivalent of emptying out our retirement and going to the casino and putting the roulette table and putting it on red and letting it ride. That's what it felt like, but that was where we were at as parents. We were going to do whatever it takes, to bring her back. So we pursued that treatment. We paid $12,000 plus travel expenses to Chicago for that treatment in April 2012. By the end of the summer, she had recovered and was able to return to her general education classroom with some special education support. So before, they couldn't even maintain her in the classroom. They had to put her in her own special office with 2 paras because she was so out of control and violent. And she had been like a model student before that. She had gotten 100% on the math assessment. And I remember taking her to the pediatric neurologist, and he was asking me if she had a intellectual disability. I was like, no, she just scored 100% on this math assessment. She doesn't have an intellectual disability. But he had never seen her before, us walking into his office. Okay, sorry, I'm chasing some rabbits. I'm sorry about that. So by the end of the summer, she recovered and was able to return to the classroom, and no outside support was needed. I discontinued the SCD waiver and the medical card in September. So I was curious, and I asked, how much was that treatment, all those things, and I had them print out for me all the services that she had received, and this is not it. Here it is, over that time period, and I added them up, and it equaled $10,000. And so that was over a short duration of just the summer months, pretty much. That was the cost of an IVIG treatment, basically. So if we had not gotten that IVIG treatment, those costs would have continued. And I'm not saying, I don't want to say that the SCD waiver is not important to families, some families, because it is. It just was not the treatment my daughter needed, because my daughter was having a medical issue that needed to be treated with the right appropriate treatment. It was an autoimmune issue. So I do believe, so the SCD waiver is used to prevent hospitalization. That's the idea of it, to save money that way and to keep kids with their families. But I don't think there's no way we could have continued on that path. I believe she would have ended up in a residential treatment facility and maybe the state hospital. I'm not ruling that out either. That's how bad it was. So without that IVIG treatment, the state of Kansas would have paid a lot more money, thousands and thousands of dollars. So Representative Epley has written a bill asking for IVIG coverage, a pilot program for Panda Pans, for state employee health plans for the next 2 years. After 2 years and assessing the actual costs, which I believe will be minimal, and why I believe they're going to be even more minimal than that was in that report, is because they were assuming that each child would need like one IVIG treatment a year. I don't think most children need that. There might be some, yes. And then we would like to extend the coverage of IVIG throughout the state. I believe this bill would be cost effective for the state as well as providing needed relief for Kansas families and children. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Quick questions? Representative Proctor.
Thank you for coming to tell the story again.
Yes.
I can't imagine how difficult it is. Each time you have to build up to walk into this room. And I'm asking medical information, so please, if you don't feel comfortable answering, just say
Oh,
you
no,
don't feel
it's
comfortable
fine.
answering.
It's all out there.
Yeah. Was it strep that caused this for your daughter?
No, we never found the strep connection, actually, so that's why PANS is so important. That's why there's no blood test that really diagnoses it. It is truly like a clinical diagnosis, and clinical meaning the symptoms that are presented, which the hallmark symptom of Panda Pans is the sudden onset. So that is different from other kind of mental health illnesses where you'll see more of a gradual onset. Like the onset with Panda Pans is like, bam, overnight.
So you have no idea what it was that she was exposed to that caused this?
No, okay, so let me back that up a little bit. She was, it was Dr. Kovacevic in Chicago that initially diagnosed her, and he believed it probably started with strep in the very beginning. And I think Dr. Richardson, she was the psychiatrist that testified last time. She did talk about like there can be multiple kind of onsets, and so the first time it's mild, and then you kind of go back to baseline until you hit this kind of falling off the cliff moment.
Right.
Which is that's what we have.
I guess what I was trying to get at it, I'm
Yes.
just trying to find out, like, what's the length of time between like the initial infection, the sore throat or whatever, and then all of a sudden your kid's just a different
I don't
kid?
know.
No idea? Okay. And then this is probably an unfair question for you. If anybody else can answer, I'd appreciate it. But about how many kids are we talking about in the state of Kansas?
I mean, they estimated 1 in 200, but I would say now, Dr. Kobayashi, who testified last time, told me that, yes, it could be 1 in 200. A lot of those might have very mild symptoms that can be managed actually with psychotropic medications, therapy. It's probably about 3% of those that are the extreme cases that need IVIG.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You are the good mother, so thank you. How many treatments? How many treatments did your daughter?
Well, and okay, so here, we had one when she was 9. It was 9. And then she had kind of another big regression when she was 12. So we did another treatment. And I really thought like kind of we were over this. She was in college and things like that, but she's had another regression. I don't think I'm just gonna be honest, I don't think it's gonna require IVIG. We did IV steroids and antibiotics over Christmas, 3 days worth, and that seems to have really helped her. So I'm hopeful that that will do the trick.
What I don't understand is if you had cancer, you're not going to just let
Yes.
one group do it.
Right.
I don't understand why, if it's an illness, why we don't cover all of them.
Well, I would love that.
That's just a thought. I just think if it's a real thing, which you said it is, I don't know why everybody is not covered by whatever.
Right. I think the idea was to, Dr. Epley wanted to do kind of and then isn't that required to do a pilot project for, okay, so that's why. You have to do a pilot project first through the state of Kansas before we open up coverage to everyone. Now, I would hope that insurance companies would do the right thing and cover, but so far, no.
2 years is a long time, though.
It is a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've heard a lot about this from this committee and when I was on Health and Human Services, and it's really, yeah, and really, I hope people like you can get some coverage. And I was just wondering, and Dr. Epley might know this, are there other conditions that have similar symptoms? Is it hard to really diagnose this, or?
I mean, there are, because it's really sudden onset of OCD and anxiety is kind of the hallmark. But then but it's the sudden onset that is the hallmark symptom of this. Where OCD and anxiety have kind of a gradual onset.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And thank you very much. And like I said, I'm hoping people in your situation can get some help really soon.
Well, and I would say I'm not going to get any help, So I'm just here out of my own, because we're too old and we're not going to, and it's fine. And like there's other families here, like this is what I gave Dr. Epley when I first met with him, that little light reading. But this was like letters from Kansas families, letters of support from people of the community, and an example of other bills had been passed by other states, as well as all the current research that had been taken place recently. And so I wanted him just to be aware of what support was out there, and that it was more than just me. Like, I'm the only one here today, but it's more than just me.
Yeah, well, it's very unselfish of you to be concerned and pick up the cause for everyone else. And I'm sure Dr. Epley read all that and just some light reading. Just
And I think it's not just me, it's the other parents too. And I said that in my written report. It's like, I think once you've experienced something like this, you don't want other people to go through the same thing. And so that's what drives you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So further questions, committee? Representative Neighbor.
This isn't a question per se, but more of an informative piece for those that are new on the insurance committee. Everything we see always looks worthy of coverage, but there's a process in Kansas where we are required to go through a year-long study in the state employee health system. No other insurance companies, just the state employee health, to ascertain what that amount of money, it will cost and how that will spread across the board to all people who are covered by that insurance company, because this will be spread not just by one family or 200 families, it's by every family in that program. So if this tacked 3 cents on or 5 cents on, that's how that is established. And so that's why this study was so important, because it gave us numbers, true numbers, that they thought were, could be expected in raising an insurance rate. And so we always have to look at that when there's a mandate. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit on what that process is. So if you bring something to us that you want to add on to an insurance form, it has to go through that year's study so we can ascertain the amount of money that it will cost the taxpayers or the people that are on that policy. After that, other insurance companies have an approximation of what it's going to cost, and many of them pick that up on their own. So that's just a system we have to follow. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Further questions, committee? Seeing none at the moment, thank you.
Okay, thank
For
you.
telling your story again. So with that, Dr. Epley, I believe you have something that is very short. Okay.
I really appreciate the committee and you, Chairman, letting us tee this up again. To say it's been a journey, you know, in an ideal world, the way when you hear these parents give these testimonies, it's like, we need to do this 3 years ago. This is, you know, this isn't right. I mean, we need to get this done. But there is a process in Kansas, and we have tried to follow the process, and it has been a long and winding road for me. And all of you, I hope you get to get a bill like this someday and go through the process, because it's really fascinating. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next conferee is from the plan at Segal, if I said that correctly, and if Gina Sander is with us. And if you can lead us through the high points in particular. In committee, we do have at least one more bill we need to do. For those who are thinking of House Bill 2586, at this point, I will make the call that will be slid to Wednesday, as I don't think we will get that far, but we'll at least try and get through the next, this one and the following bill. So thank you, Gina, and over to you.
All right, I am Gina Sander with Siegel Consulting. I am the Atlanta Health Practice Leader, and we've been working with the state employee health plan since 2015 or so, providing consulting and actuarial support to them. Well, would you like me to share my screen? This is essentially the same report. Do you want me to go through the slides or just talk to you a little bit about the slides?
It is your call on that. If you are prepared to share your screen and that's the way you'd like to go, that's great.
Okay, let's try this. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen. Thanks.
Okay, see if I can move some of this out of the way. All right, I'll just go down through here pretty quickly. You all have a copy of this. These are the definitions of PANS and PANDAS and the groupings of symptoms associated with them. So here are the costs that we came up with, and it is based on the 1 in 200, and these are kind of the lowest cost and the highest cost estimate based on 0.5% prevalence, which is the 1 in 200, and then we increased that by 3 for the high prevalence, just to give an estimate of what we thought it would be. The average cost, let me go to the next page here. The average cost we came up with is about close to $12,000 here with the weighted. We have some costs here for mild and moderate. Most of the cases fall into the mild and moderate range. There are some that fall into the severe range, as Dr. Epley pointed out. And here the bottom chart there shows the prevalence, and the 11,904 number there is members ages 3 to 14 who are currently enrolled in the state health plan. So this was a cost based on the state health plan's enrollment at this time. The social impact of this, these kids develop tics and OCD overnight. I mean, it very quickly, as the lady who just spoke was saying, it's not something that ramps up. It happens overnight. And some of this, we've expanded some of this to age 17 here, just for perspective, and there are kids that are still in that range that have it. The most prevalent, let me see if it's on this one. Yes, the most prevalent age of onset is in the 4 to 9 year range. And you'll see the second bullet here, primary symptoms, 37% with OCD, 14% with tics, and 49% with both. So these kids really do have a lot of issues going on, and they get diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, they get diagnosed with anxiety, they get caught up in this circular round of doctors with, psychiatrists, psychologists, neurologists, trying to diagnose and treat whatever they have. So that takes a lot of time and a lot of mistreatment, a lot of misplaced cost. So let's go down some more. The treatment again is, go to the next one. This shows you the legislation where legislation has been passed in several states and states that are currently proposing legislation. I know Dr. Epley talked about the ICD-10 codes. The World Health Organization in January of this year was supposedly coming out with an ICD-11 diagnosis code and some additional codes that were very specific to PANDA. So generally, there's been a lack of awareness, but awareness is growing to this. So we're hoping that kids will be diagnosed more frequently or in a short period of time rather than long years of trying to determine what the issue is. You'll see here in the second bullet, on average, patients saw up to 12 medical providers, and there was an approximately 3-year delay in receiving a diagnosis. And even those that were diagnosed, 20% experienced a 12-month delay before receiving appropriate treatment. Long-term effects, I know somebody asked about long-term effects, and we were reading things, these kids don't thrive. And as adults, they may have ADHD, the anxieties, they can't function in school, so they don't get the proper education, they can't hold a job. So it really affects all aspects of their lives, and the social stigma of having the issues that they have. And indirect costs, is this the sheet? No, the next one. Oh, this goes back to the hardships faced. Those who pay out of pocket, $5,000 per treatment, up to $33,000. These treatments are based on weight, a lot of times the dosage, and so the longer you wait to get treated, you've grown, you're a bigger kid, you're heavier, and your treatment costs more also. But parents have had to sell their houses, refinance their homes, sell vehicles and furniture, establish GoFundMe accounts, trying to cover the costs of these bills. Let's see here. Indirect costs include travel, and of course all the unnecessary medical bills from the misdiagnoses or tests trying to figure out what was wrong, or medications that have been tried, therapies that have been tried. Here's some anecdotal information. It manifests in psychiatric symptoms, but it doesn't respond to psychiatric medications. And somebody said they had tests that kept coming back normal, and the neurologist would refer them to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist referred back to the neurologist, and the pediatricians recommended therapists, and you're just caught in this circle of trying to treat what you have and figure out what you have. So financial impact, the recommended treatment is the antibiotics, the intravenous immunoglobulin treatment, and some therapies. And this IVIG is used to treat other symptoms now, various autoimmune diseases and so forth, but it's been considered experimental for PANS and PANDAS, and it has been proven to work. So as I showed before, several states have already passed legislation to cover it, but we're hoping that it can be covered more globally. The appropriate combination depends on the severity. Like I said earlier, most of the cases fall into the mild to moderate range. There are a few that fall into the severe treatment range. You'll see here on this top, on the third box across the top, this goes back to the first slide I showed with the approximate treatment on average costing about $12,000. The treatments are currently available. And as I said, they're frequently used to treat other autoimmune conditions. It's unlikely the estimated cost that we looked at in terms of the population of the state health insurance plan right now was less than 1/5 the cost of the whole plan. 1/5 of a percent, excuse me, less than 1/5 of a percent of the total estimated cost of the whole plan in terms of overall cost of the state employee health plan. So the incidence of PANS and PANDAS is pretty low. In fact, in 1 in 200 children between 3 and 14. So early diagnosis is definitely what we're looking for. And, you know, it costs less. Here were some savings in the third bullet here. If you catch it earlier, if you diagnose it while it's mild and moderate before it becomes too severe. And here are some additional treatment statistics. The second bullet there, several case studies have confirmed efficacy 1 year following treatment. A 2018 study followed up to 4.8 years, and 88% did not experience clinically significant obsessive compulsive symptoms within the follow-up time. So frequently one treatment will work, but you may have a couple of treatments, but they tend to last a while. And so here's back to the, you know, 0.19% of total plan costs, less than 1/5 of a percent. And here are all of our sources listed in the back for your reference as you go through the report.
So thank you for for going through. Thank you for the thorough report that we have, and appreciate that. Committee, we have limited time for questions. Is there 1 or 2 questions that we need answered? And certainly we can follow up with any information that we need to get. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, Dr. Epley, you know, we've talked about all the states having a common computer, everything going to a common computer, and the resources coming out. So if Illinois has a plan, and Delaware, Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota, all of them are working on, can't we use theirs instead of having just our own?
Well, those are treatment protocols that are in those states, and we can certainly use those treatment protocols. This is just a promotion to try to get it embedded into the state employee health plan. We can utilize those protocols. I'm sure that that'll be researched extensively by the docs that will be referred to through the state employee health plan. So yes, we'll use that experience of those states to facilitate it happening in Kansas, I'm certain.
And I understand the timeline, but that can't speed up the process, using those other states' information.
I think we have to follow state statutes, and I referred to those in my testimony, Representative Smith, and we're following that, and I think we've done our due diligence, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Sander? Seeing none, thank you for the report. We certainly appreciate that and would look forward to following up with any other questions and information that we have. The next piece of the story is where the insurance companies are on this, and that's an important part to consider as well. And Larry Ann Brown, welcome to committee to share the full perspective.
I am Larry Ann Brown. I'm here today on behalf of Cigna. We're here to respond to the PanPandas report. You have Cigna's written comments in front of you. I will divert just a little bit from them. But first, I would like to commend the proponents who, with the guidance of Representative Epley, they followed the procedures that were laid out in statute that requires the cost impact study be performed before consideration of any new health insurance mandate. The procedure, as Representative Neighbor has pointed out, was set in place to ensure that the legislature has the data and the financial information needed to make a sound, fiscally responsible decision before mandating additional coverage and cost to the private health insurance market. The proponents are following that procedure, and we absolutely do commend them. Should the legislature decide to take the next step and require the state employees plan to cover that benefit, the Appropriations and Ways and Means Committee, I'm assuming, will need to appropriate the money necessary to provide that coverage, which according to the report could be anywhere from $200,000 to a worst-case scenario of $2 million. But just a few things to keep in mind before mandating any health insurance mandates. All of them have very good reasons to support. They're all hard to say no to. I can tell you from my 27 years of being here and testifying against them, it's not an easy job. But how do you say yes to one of them, but no to the others? As a representative of the health insurance industry, it's my job to do my best to make sure that you understand that for every mandate that you say yes to, it has the potential of raising cost for your constituents who purchase health insurance. Individuals, small employers, some large employers, cities, counties, school districts, etc. One mandate may not add up to much, but 3, 4, or 5 can add up quickly. Robotics, nutritional formula, breast imaging, wigs for cancer patients, oral chemo, wheelchairs for children, hearing aids, and other durable medical equipment are just a few of the mandates that I've had to testify against in my 27 years. The Kansas legislature has been very deliberate and very careful in choosing which mandates to pass, as each one of them has some sort of a fiscal note. We only ask that you do the same with this mandate. In addition, please remember that health insurance mandates passed by the state legislature don't affect self-insured ERISA plans, Farm Bureau, cost-sharing non-insurance plans such as Medishare. State mandates also don't apply to Medicaid, Medicare, or the short-term limited duration plans that are being discussed in the following hearing. In fact, a mandate that's passed by this legislature on the private market only affects about 30% of the private market. Finally, under the ACA, the federal government requires health plans to cover the Essential Health Benefits Package, which is basically a standard health plan that includes coverage for 10 broad categories of services, limits cost sharing, and meet minimal actuarial standards for health insurance policies that started after January 1st of 2014. These requirements apply to qualified health plans in the exchanges as well as health insurance plans offered in the small group and individual markets outside of the exchanges. Should any state mandate coverage above the required benefits included as part of the Essential Health Benefit Package, such as this mandate, the state's then required to pay for the increased cost associated with that mandate for those who purchase insurance through the exchange. That means you all will have to pay for that. These costs must be picked up by the state and reported annually to the federal government. This is just another reason why the committee's got to give careful consideration before passing any new health insurance mandate. And I'll be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you for appearing with committee and representing committee. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks.
So committee, that is our update on 2110, and we will continue to discuss how we move forward, but appreciate the update and everyone that participated. Next, I'd like to move to our hearing on Senate Bill 199. So if you'll turn your attention to that, I'd ask the reviser to start with an update of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Senate Bill 199 would amend KSA 2020 sub 40-2193 to bring existing state law into line with a change that was made in 2019 to the federal definition of short-term limited duration insurance. Just to provide some background, 2019 was the year, 2019 House Bill 2053 was the original bill that addressed this federal change and was originally heard on February 4th, 2019 by this committee. No action was taken on the bill at that time, and Senate Bill 199 is largely a reintroduction of the same bill. In 2020, Senate Bill 199 was introduced and was heard by the Senate Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance, where the committee amended the bill to strike certain disclaimer language, and it was passed out of committee. On March 31st of 2021, the bill was passed by the Senate Committee of the Whole on a vote of 27-6, and the bill was passed out and referred to this committee on April 6th of last year. No action was taken on the bill at that time. The bill's provisions were then included in the CCR for Senate Bill 29 during conference committee, but that ultimately the CCR did not pass. Under current state law, a short-term limited duration health insurance policy may be either 6 or 12 months long in duration and may be renewed once only, regardless of the policy duration. Senate Bill 199 would amend KSA 40-2, 193 to define a short-term limited duration insurance policy to be an insurance policy that is less than 12 months in duration and that offers renewal or extension periods up to a maximum policy duration of 36 months total. This new language would match the federal definition. The federal regulation adopting the new definition also requires that a notification statement be printed on any application and on contract materials for a short-term limited duration health insurance policy. Among other things, the statement would inform the consumer that the health insurance policy being considered is not compliant with the Affordable Care Act, and that if the coverage were to expire, the consumer might have to wait until an open enrollment period to get other health insurance coverage. This disclaimer language was stricken by the Senate Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance, and that language is shown stricken in this bill. Lastly, should the committee act favorably upon this bill, we would need to update the statutory reference, since this is a holdover from last year. The bill would become effective upon its publication in the statute book, and with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee questions, Representative Proctor.
Okay. If we don't pass this bill and don't bring our definition online with federal definition, does that mean there's no more short-term health care insurance in Kansas, or do we just have a different definition?
We have a different definition. We have a more strict definition than the federal definition. So our definitions would differ, but ours would be more strict.
But we'd still have short-term health care,
Still
just
have
wouldn't
it.
have the, okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Howe.
Okay, so short-term limited duration insurance is exactly that. It's short-term, it's limited duration. You can be, it doesn't cover pre-existing conditions. It doesn't cover the requirements that the ACA policies need to. So as part of the notification to the consumer who's applying for that, there needed to be this disclaimer language. I think the thought at the time was that because the ACA's requirements are not being enforced by the federal government, that disclaimer language was not needed. So ultimately, the committee decided to strike that.
Thank you. A quick follow-up. Does the current state statute, if it would revert back to the state, I guess, definition of a state health plan, is there any requirements for a disclaimer on something like that?
Not currently, no.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Neighbor.
Just for clarification, so if a patient has purchased this, or a couple has purchased this, and someone gets pregnant, they're automatically not covered. Is that correct?
I believe it would depend on what the contract states.
Okay, it doesn't have pregnancy coverage in it.
It would depend on what the contract states. It would be contractually defined.
Okay, how about cancer?
It would depend on what the contract states.
Okay, because I know from talking with several groups out there, they feel that you'd have to go out and get a rider to cover these particular items. And I guess my aversion to this is by the time you get a writer to cover maybe oncology or fractures or childbirth or heart issues, you then have a full policy pretty much. And the other thing is, when we talk about extending this, gap to me is a 6 to 12 month issue. It's not 3 years that you do that. So I have a little problem with extending that to a 3-year coverage, because you should have made a decision. It's not really gap, it's a policy for 3 years.
Representative Neighbor, I'm the person that drafts it. I am not the person that defines policies. So
I appreciate.
can't speak to any of those decisions, ma'am.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Further questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you for the overview. Committee, I know we're running short on time, and we need to get through these. So we do want to make sure that we keep our questions together. We may need to go through proponents and then have questions, opponents and then have questions. And to our patient and talented conferees that are coming up, if you've had a chance to hear a point that was made previously, if you would just reference it and continue on with your testimony, that would be great. And we will welcome our first proponent, Senator Gossage, to committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Croft, and Ranking Member Neighbor. Currently, the Senate is on call. So I was given permission, everybody's in their chairs, I was given permission to come over to testify. This is actually a very simple bill. I remember when Dan Hawkins and I were talking about this in 2019, helped to put together the 3-year or the 36 months, if you will, on the federal level, because, as was mentioned, these are short-term medical plans. They were designed to fill a gap for people who are between jobs or whatever initially. But then when the ACA came along, ACA is fine, and I write those plans all the time. As you know or may not know, I'm a health insurance agent, have been for 19 years. I'm licensed in multiple states and help people with the ACA. I write lots of that, short-term medical plans, Medicare, group plans, long-term care, et cetera. So I began to see that when people would buy a short-term medical plan prior to the ACA, they would have a plan for a short time, or maybe they bought it for a year. So let me just review what the current law says. The current law says you can have a short-term medical plan for less than 1 year. They're like 364 days. Then you can buy one more, so you can purchase another year. That's all. So if you decide I'd like to have a 3rd year, let's say, you would have to go to a different insurance company than the one you currently have, or pick a different plan with a different insurance company. Maybe they're more expensive. Then you can go back to the short-term medical plans. What the federal government decided was that let's allow these folks to go ahead and purchase a 1-year plan. Then they can purchase a 2nd-year plan, and they can purchase 3 years. Why would you want to do that? Well, currently, again, most of the short-term medical plans do not cover pre-existing conditions. They're about 70% less expensive than the plans on the ACA. You probably know that most people who buy on the ACA get a subsidy. So if I am one of those folks that get a subsidy, or if I'm working with folks, the first thing I'm going to do is take them to the ACA and let's see if you qualify for a subsidy, because it could be very affordable for you. But there are some folks that it's just not affordable at all. They either don't get a subsidy or the subsidy is so small. My son is a praise and worship pastor. The church wasn't offering health insurance. He was a perfect example of this. Then you also have folks that are between jobs. You have folks that work for a small business owner. Therefore, they have to go buy their own policy. Their income is such to where they get a very small subsidy or no subsidy at all. And you may also find folks that are like somebody that just called me this weekend, 65-year-old man going on to Medicare. What does his wife do? The company will allow her to stay on COBRA Anybody ever looked at the cost of COBRA? So COBRA was going to be extremely expensive for his wife, so the first thing we did was go to the ACA. That also was going to be very expensive. She has 3 years before she goes to Medicare. We see this often. So currently in Kansas, if you buy a short-term medical plan, they're not going to cover any of your pre-existing conditions. For the people who have this plan, they know this up front. And I'd like to address, if I could answer the question that was asked of Eileen, and that is, why did we strike that? It's because it was redundant. The federal government requires it already. Every single short-term medical plan must have that wording already. So it would be redundant for the state to require it as well. So if you bought a plan, you know up front what they cover and what they don't cover. It's very clear. Most of them don't cover pre-existing conditions. Many of them don't cover normal maternity. They may not cover prescription drugs. They may not cover mental health services. They may not cover chiropractic. All of those things are listed up front. It's kind of like only pay for what you need. So there are folks who like, I get that. I take one medication, it's $4. I'll take all my savings that I would have been spending on the exchange and help to pay for these services if I need them. They know up front what it is, yet they still choose to buy the plan. However, if they want a second year, like the woman who's 62, and when she goes to buy her second year, anything that occurred that she had in the first year will be considered pre-existing now in that second year. If she needed that third year, anything that was pre-existing in year 1 and year 2 will be pre-existing because it's starting all over for year 3. All this bill does is said, look, let's make it better for folks who do develop a condition while they're on. They cannot be dropped if they develop a condition. Unless it's those things I mentioned to you, it would be covered. So it's the standard medical things that we think of, ER, hospital visits, doctor's visits, urgent care, etc. So all this bill does is this, just what the federal government does, and that is the insurance company has an option. They can say, we are not going to cover pre-existing conditions in the first year, but if you sign up in advance that you'd also like year 2 and or year 3, we will not consider any conditions that happen in year 1 as pre-existing. So now anything that happened in year 1 will be covered in year 2 and will be covered in year 3. The question is then, do they tell you how much year 2 is going to be? Can they make it based upon your health conditions? No, they cannot, because you're not being underwritten. So they tell you up front, this is how much year 1 is going to be, this is how much year 2 will be, and this is how much year 3 will be. Now, considering that, what happens if you say, oh, I don't need that now. I had that for 5 months. Now I have an employer that offers group health insurance. I'm just going to drop this. Can you do it? Of course. You can drop that at the beginning of any month. Do you have to do the full 36 months? Absolutely not. So all we're doing is giving an option to people who find this. Now, you will hear discussion that, well, this is going to hurt the ACA marketplace. These healthy people are going to pick these plans. That was what it was thought perhaps initially in 2009. We now know we have all kinds of studies. One will be addressed in one of the proponent testimonies. This just has not occurred. You know, since 2009, since these plans were implemented in 2014, that has not been the case at all. In fact, in Kansas, I was just told today, we have 107,800 people on the marketplace in the state of Kansas. If I were to ask you how many short-term medical plans that you know of that were written, I'm sure you would probably overguess that. It's only 1,776. So very few people that have selected this, but yet they have. And this would help those folks if they should develop a condition that they do have an affordable option. Otherwise, during open enrollment, they could choose to go on the ACA. This would keep them from doing that because instead of saying, oh, I think I'll go to the ACA, they have that option, but they would still have the option to stay on the short-term medical plan. And as some would argue, not have to, quote, pollute the people in the pool in the ACA. A couple of other things that I would like to address real quickly. Yes, these bills have been around for a long time, and many states have already adopted the 36 months. We're a little behind the ball. We introduced it, it was passed out of this committee, and then we had COVID in 2020. Last year, passed out, as you heard, out of the Senate. It went into a conference committee, and many of you voted for it on the House side. However, you probably heard it was passed in the House, but then the governor vetoed that bill. So we're back this year because, number one, I would just like to say I think that was a misinformed veto. The reason that the governor gave, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Governor Kelly about this personally, but I want to, was that, well, we just need to expand Medicaid. As I just shared with you, these people don't qualify for a subsidy on the exchange. If you know anything about Medicaid expansion, that's the very low end of those folks. So Medicaid expansion would not help them. And many of these folks that didn't have a short-term option, their only option would be to go uninsured because they just don't have an affordable option available to them. So some of our neighbors that have passed this are Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, Oklahoma, have all passed this well before us. You may also hear that from opposition that, well, since they don't cover pre-existing conditions, we don't like these plans. I understand that there are going to be people that don't like these plans, but we're not voting on should we keep the plans. They're here. They've been here for a long time. Actually, we're just trying to help them be better for people who do develop a condition, one might call a pre-existing condition. Another thing is that you'll hear is that, well, they just really don't cover anything. As a health insurance agent for 19 years, I know the difference between limited benefit plans and short-term medical. Limited benefit plans, yes, they may say, we're only going to cover hospitalization up to $10,000. We're only going to cover this up to $5,000. It limits your benefit. And there have been people that have contacted me, or we had opposition testimony before where someone witnessed, I had one of these plans and this was my experience. And I wanted to say, that is not a short-term medical plan. That could not happen with a short-term medical plan. You may also hear in testimony, erroneously misguided, is that these plans are not regulated. They are not only regulated by the federal government, but they're also heavily regulated by our own insurance department. And they are looking for anybody who said, hey, I feel like I was duped, I was lied to, whatever that may be, the insurance department will be right on that, helping those folks. We also will hear that, as I mentioned, that there are more affordable plans available on the exchange now due to some of the provisions in a bill that was passed and turned into law under President Biden. Again, I work with this every day. I would be happy to sit here and show you how this person, yes, maybe they went from no subsidy to $50 subsidy, but when you're talking about an $800 premium, the subsidy is just not enough. And then let me conclude by, if you have the testimony in front of you, I have actually, and I did this as late as Friday because I wanted it to be completely up to date. I went in and put in a 62-year-old female in the exchange. What would that cost the 62-year-old female who doesn't get a subsidy? You'll see that her total out-of-pocket is $8,600, and her premium is $580. If she wanted to go with the more expensive plan with the lower out-of-pocket of $5,000, it would be $1,650 a month. Know anybody that could afford that? But yet I'm showing you some of the most popular plans for short-term medical plans, and they range from $162. The most popular plan is $439. This is a $5,000 deductible all-inclusive plan. If you answer questions, 7 questions to say how healthy you are, some of the carriers will drop that down to $357. I'm non-tobacco, for example, is one of those 7 questions. I don't ride competitive motorcycles. That would be one of the questions. My BMI is in the average range. So you have this before you. Because I can go on there and I can shop around and look at this data, it also has a 22-year-old male. And finally, we get questions about, well, families. You may not know this, but if you work for an employer, most of the time the employer is going to pay a large swath of your premium, 90%, 100%, 80%. But how much do they pay towards your dependents? Not much. In fact, sometimes nothing. But they still offer dependent coverage. As long as they offer dependent coverage, neither you nor your family can get any subsidy on the exchange. Did you know that? Not if it's affordable to the family, it's affordable to the individual, and that their portion of the premium is not more than 9.68% of their salary. So there are lots of folks out there who are actually trying to go to the exchange because, like, I can't put them on my plan at work, it's way too expensive. I cannot afford this. So they could at least have an option with short-term medical. And one last, if I may, Mr. Chair, is that if you are going to sign up with the exchange, you have a one time a year from November 1st to December 15th to sign up for a plan. The rest of the time, if you called me and said, I should have gotten health insurance, could I get it now? My mother's after me. Your options are a short-term medical plan. I'm afraid I can't sign you up for the ACA unless you have a special enrollment period. You just lost your job. You moved considerably out of your area. There has to be a reason. Short-term medical plans, you can sign up today and they can start as early as tomorrow. Questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Given that the senator may need to return to the floor, are there any key questions we want to address to her before the rest of the proponent testimony? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. You gave us 2 examples of the 7 questions. Would you provide the committee with all 7?
I would be happy to.
Thank you.
Again, I would just be using like one carrier as an example.
That's
They have
good
different
enough.
questions. I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of my questions was, I didn't see it listed here, and maybe you can clarify, but I do see that you were giving us quotes for individuals on the marketplace. I did not see their income listed or how much subsidy they may qualify for when you were giving us these estimates. Can you clarify what you may have based that on?
I based it on if they receive no subsidy. And most of these folks do not receive a subsidy. If they do, it's very small, $5, $15.
So to clarify then, in these cases, the individuals would have had to have made between $12,000 or under $12,880 per year or over approximately $51,000?
Well, it would be 400% of the poverty level. So the poverty level being 12.8. Take that times, which you probably did, times 4. But again, if you go in and put that in and you look at what the subsidies are, they may be $15. So you could be right at that level, and it may be so. But also remember that they look at the household income, not necessarily just the individual. The woman at 62 that I mentioned, her husband is on Medicare, but his income is still listed as part of her income, even though she would be the only one on the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee. Further questions? Seeing none at the moment. Thank you for your testimony.
My pleasure. I will be watching my cell phone to see when they call me back.
We have many important things to try and accomplish, and we are already at the end of our time. Committee, how much additional time can we spend? I want to make sure we give our opponents as well adequate time at the end. So if we could continue for another 30 minutes, that would be very useful, given the few times we have. We have made it through, I think, 6 conferees with 9 to go. We need to be able to hit more than 2 topics in a day, or we will not get a lot done this year, which isn't terrible, but we want to make sure we address what's needed. So thanks for the indulgence on that. I'm in the same boat of having to take off. But our next proponent is, let's see, is Mr. Cannon with us? Yes. Okay. And Clancy? Yes, and I have them both via WebEx. I didn't know if we had anyone else live. So if Mr. Blaze would be available on WebEx.
I'm available. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I'll be brief because Senator Gossage was very comprehensive, and I don't have a lot of additional information to add to her sort of excellent presentation. I am the president of Paragon Health Institute. It's a new health policy think tank, and we don't endorse or oppose legislation, but I have spent extensive time working on short-term plans. I've done research on them, so I'm just going to give you a few highlights of my work and the work of some other individuals on short-term plans. I was at the National Economic Council at the White House for the first 2.5 years of the Trump administration and worked on the rule that expanded the time for short-term to 364 days and the limited duration definition to 3 years. And Senator Gossage really laid out the key reason that we did this. It was to give consumers another option that offered them more protection. Allowing an individual or a family to keep a plan for more than 3 months allows them protection from having to go through medical underwriting again, and it gives them more options. My family, we moved to Florida a little over a year ago, and for the first 11 months of last year, we were insured on a short-term plan. And it was like really convenient to sign up. You went to eHealth. They gave you options for 3-month plans, 6-month plans, 12-month plans, and 36-month plans. They showed you what the obviously the premiums, deductibles, what the limits on that coverage were, and it was easy. And again, my family, I mean, I know the short-term market just about as well as anyone, and was very comfortable having my family insured under a short-term plan for that period of time. Chris Pope did a study for the Manhattan Institute comparing the short-term market to the ACA market. He did the study back in 2019, and he found that premiums for short-term plans for equivalent insurance coverage were much lower than ACA premiums, in some cases about half the cost. And one thing that I'll add to what Senator Gossage's excellent testimony is that short-term plans tend to cover far more providers. So more doctors and more hospitals take short-term coverage than take ACA plans. For instance, in Texas, you can't go onto the exchange and find a single plan that covers MD Anderson. But short-term plans do. MD Anderson accepts short-term coverage. Senator Gossage mentioned a study that I did. So there was a concern that short-term plans and allowing short-term plans would draw healthy people out of the individual market and harm the individual market. I did a study a year ago that broke down the country into states that fully permitted short-term plans and states that restricted short-term plans. And it's about half and half. And I looked at the trends in competition. So that's the number of insurers offering coverage in the individual market. So again, this is the ACA market. Premiums in the ACA market, and enrollment in exchanges. And it actually turns out on all of those dimensions, the ACA individual market performed better after 2018 in states that fully permitted short-term plans than in states that restricted short-term plans. So one of the main reasons that opponents have for restricting short-term plans that harms the individual market, it's not borne out by the data. In conclusion, I think you have 6 main considerations about short-term plans as you consider the legislation. One, it's an additional option for consumers, an option that for many of them is more affordable and covers more providers. The second, the legislation you're considering would increase consumer protection for short-term plans by allowing people to keep them longer and avoid medical underwriting. The third is that it's going to reduce the number of people without health insurance in your state. The fourth is that it permits greater plan innovation. The fifth is, and Senator Gossage mentioned this, these plans are subject to state regulation. And the sixth, there's evidence that permitting these plans could improve the individual market. And as far as the question on what do these plans cover, you can buy many short-term plans. They're all going to cover hospitalization. Many of them will cover prescription drugs, mental health services. Chris Pope, in his study that I mentioned, provides a pretty comprehensive review of the types of coverage that short-term plans provide. Thank you for your time.
So thank you for your testimony. Looking at the time and trying to hold this to 30 minutes, we only have another minute or two for proponent oral testimony. I believe we have Mr. Clancy remaining. And we do have some written testimony that I would direct the committee's attention to. I believe we have three in particular from the Opportunity Solution Projects, from the Kansas Policy Institute, and I believe someone who had worked with Ms. Gossage, Kim Quaid, on the issue.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Very briefly, Dean Clancy, Americans for Prosperity. We strongly support SB 199 because it gives Kansans more options. And I won't say more than that except to note that 35 states have decided to conform to the federal standard. That's 2/3 of the union. And we believe that Kansas families should enjoy the same benefits. All your neighboring states are fully supportive of short-term plans, and we hope Kansas will join that enlightened group.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and I think I can remember that testimony as well. It's short enough I can hold it in my head. So thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent of Senate Bill 199? Are there any questions the committee had for any of the proponents? Seeing none, we will move to our opponent testimony and welcome to committee Megan Word. Thank you for coming to join the committee, and we will give equal time as needed by, you don't have to take it, but we will grant equal time to our opponent testimony.
I'm sorry. Am I really loud now? Okay. My name is Megan Word. I'm the new Government Relations Director for the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network, and I'm here today to oppose Senate Bill 199. It's my understanding that the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network opposed Senator Gorsuch's bill last year as well, so I won't repeat myself. And I know we have other opponents on the phone. I will tell you that I submitted my testimony with my supplemental study with the committee chairperson staff, so you all have a copy of this study. So what I'll go ahead and do is just make some points. Senator Gorsuch did an excellent job laying out what the bill does. I wanted to go ahead and point out some of the things that Senate Bill 199 does not do. And I think it's important when you consider not only the American Cancer Society's constituents, but its families like the family who testified on the bill previous to ours, and really any family who could experience a critical illness really at any time. I want you to know that SD short-term limited duration policies do not provide cost-effective coverage, especially for major illnesses, which Senator Gorsuch did say. They are not required to provide coverage for cancer screenings, diagnostic services, treatment, or the continuation of cancer treatment. While federal guidance requires private health insurance to cover COVID-19 testing, vaccines, or related services, short-term limited duration plans do not require that coverage. Short-term limited duration plans were created to provide temporary coverage for individuals while they seek out more comprehensive permanent health insurance, as the senator cited, those who are in between jobs, those who couldn't afford their COBRA payments, or in this day and age, people who cannot afford ACA coverage even with the subsidies that are available. Subsidies that I might add that were temporarily increased for more people through the American Rescue Plan Act. In February 2018, the federal regulations changed that definition of short-term limited duration plans from the 12 months to one extension to 12 months to 36 months. And that's what Senate Bill 199 provides for. It codifies, matches our statute with the federal regulations. What Senate Bill 199 does not guarantee is a renewal or an extension of those people who are insured under short-term limited duration plans. It does not prohibit the practice of rescission or insurers who carry short-term limited duration plans from re-underwriting an insurer's policy in midstream once that person begins to claim benefits. It does not prohibit the medical underwriting or medical requalifications for those extensions. Did I break this? Okay. I was going to say, my God, what did I do? Thank you. You won't invite me back. And Senate Bill 199 does nothing to regulate the manner and form in which the short-term limited duration plan policy information is communicated to customers. Senator Gossage is correct. That notification is laid out in the federal regulation. However, the regulation also allows states to restrict or closely mandate how that notification is provided to customers, how often, where it's notified. Senate Bill 99 does not touch that at all. So while it is required under federal regulations, the federal government tells the states, you can decide how transparent or how detailed you want insurers to make that policy information available to customers who are looking at buying these plans. Senate Bill 199 does not do that. In short, ACS-CAN supports the idea that healthcare must be adequate, affordable, and accessible to everyone. Senate Bill 199 does not meet those standards, and so American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network cannot support its passage. Thank you. I'd be happy to take questions. Whether or not I can answer them remains to be seen.
So thank you for being with committee. I believe you are our one in-person conferee. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as an opponent? With that, are there any questions that the committee would wish to address? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That last point you made about the federal government not requiring certain things to be notified, could that objection not be addressed by an amendment to this bill?
Yes, yes.
Would you draft some language that would meet your satisfaction?
Yeah, yes, there are states that have done that. There are states, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other key questions that we have? Seeing none, thank you. And we may have other questions later, but we will look forward to our other testimony via WebEx and would welcome Ms. Rinker with the Heart Association.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you well.
Wonderful. Yes, I'm with the American Heart Association. I thank you for considering my remarks in opposition to SB 199, the proposed extension of these short-term limited duration plans. I'm representing a number of advocacy groups here today. You have our written submission. We all have our various missions, but we are united around our well-documented opposition to the extension of these plans. We oppose measures like SB 199 because despite strong public support for basic protections and expectations of what a person should get when they pay their hard-earned money for health coverage, these plans fall far short. These basics are fairness to folks living with pre-existing conditions, not denying them or charging them more for coverage, filling a prescription without being stuck with a huge bill at the pharmacy counter, mental health care for when families face tough times like the varied challenges caused by this pandemic, avoiding financial ruin due to caps in coverage when facing unexpected medical events like heart attack, diagnosis of MS, or cancer. Unfortunately, our organizations that exist to provide families and patients with assistance when facing tough diagnoses find ourselves unable to help folks who are blindsided by these coverage gaps. They had no way of knowing that they would need these protections and didn't fully understand their low-cost plan didn't cover much. Insurance is difficult to understand. I am a parent of multiple children with neurological and heart conditions. Years ago, I would have never guessed that expensive testing, medications, trips to Mayo were in our future. That's why the testimony from the Panda Pans mom you heard from today resonated with me personally. And let's be clear, these short-term plans won't cover IVIG. That treatment will cap at $3,000. I have had to use appeals processes for denials, and it's really a lot to navigate, even with my experience as an advocate, but at least processes exist for me to fight for what my children need. Unfortunately, plans like SB 199 don't allow for any appeals at all. Families are just stuck. Extending these plans another year comes with no benefits to consumers. You will hear from an American Heart Association volunteer who was able to acquire a comprehensive plan for $25 a month. Folks don't need to compromise quality coverage for the sake of affordability, because affordable and comprehensive options do exist. For those that need to turn to a short-term plan due to loss of coverage for a non-qualifying event, well, they already exist and can be renewed for up to 2 full years under Kansas law, more closely abiding by their name and their function. Kansans are independent folks, Kansans are independent folks, but they do expect their lawmakers to look out for them and to provide basic protection. We're asking that you do that job, and please stop this completely unnecessary expansion here in committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and I believe you made reference to several of our written opponents that we also have testimony from, so thank you for that testimony. Next, we have Ngoc Bong, I believe, and please correct me on my pronunciation to start with.
Thank you, Chair. The pronunciation is Ngoc Vuong, but I also go by Ngoc Bong. Right, can you all hear me? Bill?
We can, thank you, and please proceed.
Right. My dad, he was an airman of the South Vietnamese Air Force who became a refugee to the United States shortly before the fall of Saigon. My mom, she gave up her dreams of becoming a physician, and she had 5 younger siblings to care for. The United States, it empowered my parents with the opportunities to provide their children with the education, health, and safety that they needed to thrive. I'm a proud first-generation son of immigrants. When I was 15, I lost my mom to a sudden and unexpected brain aneurysm rupture. Say that losing her was painful, that would be an understatement, but I'm very blessed with the experiences I did have with her. She taught me that's very important, it's paramount that we help each other, and this information, this knowledge led to my proactive involvement in the community. As a high school student, I created IC Teens in Mind. IC Teens in Mind is a youth-led mental health advocacy group. We organized awareness campaigns and met with community leaders, elected officials to advocate for school-based mental health services and to address stigma. After high school, I was recruited by a local substance use prevention coalition to help oversee their prevention, research, and evaluation efforts. I can confirm that during this pandemic, youth and adults alike are at a much higher risk of experiencing mental health and substance use issues and requiring emergency care at a rate that is really expected. I'm a senior at Wichita State University. I study psychology, public health, and economics. I'm also a volunteer with the American Heart Association, and I advocate for comprehensive healthcare coverage and access. I enjoyed the benefit of being on my dad's insurance for most of my life until my dad suddenly lost a job in the middle of the pandemic. He was able to transition into Medicare, but I was left without coverage. And then I got COVID. I found myself uninsured and living with a pre-existing condition. I was worried. I was afraid. Many of my peers may view themselves as indestructible, oblivious to the risk of being uninsured, but my lived experiences have showed me otherwise, whether it's my mom's brain aneurysm rupture at the age of 46, a child in need of emergency psychiatric care and ongoing mental health treatment, access to expensive prescription drugs, or even a heart attack or a stroke. All of these can happen at any time to anyone of any age. Thankfully, I was able to access insurance on the ACA. As Carrie was mentioning, the premium tax credit was instrumental in getting my would-be premium down from $350 per month to just $25 per month. Because of my experiences, I wasn't duped by some of these deceptive ads that promise cheap coverage that could fail me easily when I need it the most. But it's very easy for others. Extending short-term insurance plans in the midst of a pandemic for up to 3 years extends the risk to unknowing young adults stuck in a situation like mine, or families who can't possibly see their next emergency around the corner, like my mom's brain aneurysm, or a teen in a mental health crisis. Families would face costs that could bankrupt them, all the while experiencing physical pain, loss, and mental trauma. Please, please, please reject the unnecessary, unfair, irresponsible extension of these junk plans.
So thank you for your testimony and sharing your story. So our next conferee would be Katrina Black.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Dana Bacon with LLS, and
Yes.
she had to leave.
Well, thank you,
She's
and if you would
volunteer.
proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Dana Bacon. I'm Regional Government Affairs Director for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I originally had a set of remarks prepared for more making the positive case for where we're coming from, but I feel a greater need to come back to some of the earlier proponent discussion and try to get some more information in front of us, because what you have been told our concerns are not exactly the same as the concerns that we would bring to you. We understand that all Kansans are looking for more options and opportunities to get the coverage they need that they can afford, but coverage is not created equal. And these products only work well up until the moment you experience serious illness. And of course, the irony is that's when you need good insurance the most. We heard earlier that some plans won't let you get access to that great cancer research center like MD Anderson. Well, if you have a short-term plan that is capping your daily hospitalization coverage, if it's putting caps on your prescription coverage, you really don't have coverage there either. I mean, there's this mix of the professional and the personal. In my past, I lost a daughter to a rare heart condition, and the care she needed in the neonatal intensive care unit cost north of $300,000. I mean, you can be on a short-term plan for your family, and if you don't have any crisis strike, it might even work because you're not testing the limits of what that coverage provides. But when you get seriously ill, you're going to blow through that prescription drug benefit. You're going to blow through that cap on what they're willing to cover. You're going to blow through the hospitalization. And then what might seem like good enough for you coverage hits up against some pretty serious liabilities. And that has serious consequences for people with blood cancer, diabetes, heart disease, other major conditions. We are not coming here asking you to ban these plans. I think that's also a very important thing to clarify. We heard that from the author of the bill. But if you listen to what we are asking for versus what they'll tell you we're asking for you to protect Kansas consumers. There's already enough risk out there. These products carry a lot of risk. And the amount of risk compared to the amount of opportunity does not make them a good deal for most people. I mean, my organization did a survey of more than 1,100 Americans to ask them, what do you take home from this? 9 in 10 people surveyed, 92% said people can get duped into buying poor quality coverage despite asking the right questions. If Katrina Black had been here to testify, you would have heard from a Harvard-trained lawyer who asked all the right questions, and what she got up front with the agent versus what played out with her own coverage was different. You can find her testimony from last year. You would find that most Americans think that short-term plans should follow the same rules as other insurance. They're regulated, just not nearly as well as the insurance that I bet most of us in this room, virtually and otherwise, count on to protect us. So we're not asking you to get rid of these products. We're asking you not to overstate their benefits and allow more people to be exposed to these risks when there are so many better options out there that we can and should be fighting for. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, and my apologies to not have a chance to hear from the other conferee, if you would share that with her. We have one additional Courtney Ederick.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, and thank you, and correct me again if I mispronounced.
It's Courtney Iderish, and I am the chair of the MS Society's Government Relations Committee in Kansas. I live with MS, and I was diagnosed at 32 years old. I was a mom. I was young. I thought I just had a little bit of a kink nerve at the time, and I didn't have any family history of anything major like this going on in my life. And when my diagnosis came, I was just completely caught off guard, like anybody else would be when you are young and healthy and have something significant happen to you. But saying that, because I was healthy, I was the perfect candidate for a plan like this. I have a self-employed husband. I was in my early 30s. I had a young child, and wouldn't have probably thought about the what ifs if we did not have comprehensive coverage. In order to get a diagnosis with multiple sclerosis, because I went in for like a pinched nerve, I ended up with a neck and spine MRI, a brain MRI, a lumbar puncture, nerve testing, and upwards of $25,000 in diagnostics, okay, which may have not been covered in a plan like this had this happened. Not to mention that the medications that are first tier medications for MS patients cost anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000. And so when we add up all the costs that come into having an expensive disease diagnosed, there's also this chance that a plan like this would even have that rescission and say, well, you didn't just get MS overnight. This is a pre-existing condition, whether you knew you had it or not. And so then I'm in medical debt because of all of these diagnostics that just took place and the medications that I need access to. I currently take a medication that is about $14,000 a month to have access to. That includes, it's an IV drug, that includes the administering of that. So on an annual basis, just for that medication to get administered is $168,000 that's billed. But along with that, because of the risks that are involved with taking this medication, I also am required to get quarterly brain MRIs and annual neck and spine MRIs as well, to make sure that I don't develop new lesions and that I don't develop a brain infection that may be a side effect of the medication. Even if someone on a plan like this needed to have access to that, they would cap out in prescription drug coverage in probably less than a month. There's no way that someone who got diagnosed in, say, a February with having a plan like this could wait until open enrollment to get on an ACA plan to get the medication and the care that they need. I really struggle because what we're not talking about is, while there are plans out there that that are these stopgap coverage plans, people really truly need comprehensive insurance, and I think that we've come to know and expect what that looks like. We know that it should cover pre-existing conditions. We know that we shouldn't have lifetime caps. We know that we shouldn't have prescription drug caps. And yet here are these plans out there that seem a little bit predatory around the way that they are being left to just sell to people under the advisement that they are, quality health benefits, when we really know that that doesn't mean quality insurance. It doesn't mean that it's affordable. It doesn't mean it's comprehensive, and it doesn't mean that it's accessible in the way that they're going to need it. I implore you to please, please, please not pass this bill. I understand that Kansans need to make decisions for themselves. I also understand that by doing this, we are really putting Kansas at risk, and that is not something that we want to do. So with that, I hope that you will join me in opposing SB 199, and I stand for questions as well.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your patience in sticking with us until this hour as well. We may have one other conferee on the phone. And did we? We're all but there. So thank you, Representative Proctor. You're right on cue. I appreciate that. But if Ms. Black is available on the phone and can hear us and have a couple of thoughts to share, please do. Okay. If you would let us know, that would be great. Representative Proctor with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a question for any of the opponents. And, I've gotten a lot of the emails. I've talked to some of the opponents face to face. And my question is some insurance better than no insurance for people that can't afford the Cadillac plan or just have to fill a gap? And I understand, we would love, that, in a perfect world, everybody would have comprehensive insurance at an affordable rate all the time. But that bill's not before us. The bill that's before us is to extend the short-term insurance to 3 years. So for any of the conferees that oppose this bill, aren't we just pulling the rug out 2 years early if we don't extend this to 3 years because these people don't have an affordable option? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are any of the opponents where they could address that?
I could answer that. This is Dana Bacon.
Thank you, Dana. Go ahead.
Representative and Chair, you asked an important question. Is some coverage better than nothing? I would argue that perhaps the only thing worse than nothing is a false sense of security. We already have 2 years available to folks in Kansas and the opportunity to jump to different products. Some of the examples we've heard are people between jobs. Goodness, I hope they're not going into year 3 of not having a job with an option. It's a pretty rare and dire set of circumstances where legislation like this would make that difference compared to the risk we described. And this also reminds me that when we heard earlier from AFP, Americans for Prosperity, about the number of states choosing to adopt the federal standard, most states in that pool simply don't have any state law in the books, so they didn't take any positive action to align with federal law. It was just the absence of action. But we already have options for 2 years. The circumstances under which somebody might need 3 are so rare that this bill would do more harm than good in our view. Thank you.
Other questions, committee? And do we have a solution for our other conferee? Okay. Seeing no other questions at the moment, and I know there's other discussion that we can have. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as an opponent, online or in the room? If not, I would direct the testimony to the committee's attention to several written opponents that we have as well, that is in the S drive and in your folder. I believe we have 7 or 8 additional conferees that are written on this topic. While holding for just a moment, is there anyone wishing to appear neutral? Seeing none, there are some questions that we have. There may be some clarity between limited benefit plans and short-term plans. I don't know if any of the opponents would have any comment on that. And Senator Gossage for a short point on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Limited benefit plans are just that. When you hear anything about caps, like they'll pay $3,000 of this, somebody mentioned hospitalization, they'll only cover so much per day. That is not a short-term medical plan. That's a limited duration plan. And if I may, an example, there is a staff member right here in the Capitol who had a short-term medical plan before coming on to the state employees plan. This was January of last year. Got the plan January 1st, and in February discovered a severe pain and ended up going to the hospital and had an emergency gallbladder surgery and had his gallbladder taken out.
So
there is no revision. Oh,
if you can catch any key difference between that, and then we'll need to let.
That's what I was about to say. So a limited benefit plan would have said, no, we only cover this much per day in the hospital. We only cover that much towards gallbladder. We only cover this much. Whereas his short-term medical plan, $97,000 worth of costs were covered completely except for his $2,500 deductible. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, to give the other side, if there was someone who had described that feels we didn't do it adequate justice from the opponent side that wishes to weigh in? Not
Mr.
that you
Chair, I
need
was
to.
that
Yes.
individual.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and with all due respect to Senator Gossage, you can go to the benefits and you can see examples of caps on benefits under short-term plans. I worked on regulations on limited benefit products in New Mexico for several months, and my peers and I work with people who've also worked in these industries for decades. I mean, the knowledge around these products is not the sole province of brokers. I mean, we would respectfully note that you can find caps for prescription drug benefits, you can find caps for ambulance services, and the documentation that dictates what is and isn't covered is more than the sum of what's in brochures. I mean, that's part of the reason we're so concerned about this. I mean, I think we can all look around the table and agree there's no such thing as a free lunch. The magic that makes these products cheaper is who you choose to cover and how much you choose to pay for the services. There's really no other mathematical genius behind it. I mean, we wouldn't argue that there's no place for these products. That's never been the debate.
So thank you for weighing in, and what I'm hearing in both cases is I need to look at what limits actually apply within the short-term policy to be clear about exactly what I have. So thank you for weighing in on both. Is our other comparee able to join us? Okay. Okay. I appreciate the effort on that and apologize to her for not being able to get her testimony in, although we will continue to be glad to review the written testimony that she has. With that, is there anyone else wishing to appear on Senate Bill 199? And seeing none, we will close the hearing. I thank everyone for their patience and their help to get us through the information. We are adjourned.